Um, what if the mindfulness gurus have it like entirely wrong? Seriously, think about it for a second. What if the absolute worst thing you can possibly do for your mental health when you're super stressed out is to, live in the present moment?
It's a pretty jarring thought, isn't it? Because we are so deeply conditioned to believe the exact opposite.
Right. Like totally the opposite.
Exactly. Every wellness app,
Yeah.
every self-help book, they all prescribe this same universal cure for modern anxiety, which is to tether your consciousness exclusively to the now. We're just told constantly that anchoring ourselves to the present is like the only way to escape our worries.
Yeah, and it sounds incredibly grounding, right? We just accept it as this absolute unshakable truth. But today, we are going to completely deconstruct that conventional wisdom. We are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating, highly provocative essay. It was written by Shiv Feng on June 16th, 2018, translated by Kinyu and edited by Peter, and it's titled Transcending Time and Space by Living in the Future.
And let me just say right up front, this text does not just offer some slight adjustment to your morning meditation routine.
Oh, definitely not.
No, it demands a total paradigm shift. The author looks at this whole concept of living in the moment and diagnoses it not as a cure at all, but as a fundamental trap of human cognition.
A trap. Wow.
Yeah. The argument here is that the present moment, for most of us anyway, is fundamentally hostile. So forcing yourself to just sit in it is, well, it's actually an act of self-sabotage.
Which is such a wild pivot. I mean, so if you have ever felt entirely overwhelmed by the daily grind, or if you're secretly exhausted by the relentless pressure to, be present when your present reality is honestly just a mountain of stress and bills.
Right, which is highly relatable.
Very relatable.
Right.
Then this deep dive is absolutely for you. Because the text argues that escaping into the future is not a failure of focus, it's actually the ultimate spiritual hack. But to really grasp this, we have to start with how the author defines existence itself, because he sets up a very specific definition of what a human being actually is, right?
Yeah, to understand the argument, we really have to look at the text's foundational concept of life.
Well,
And in the essay, the word life is capitalized.
okay, L-I-F-E, all caps.
Exactly. It's treated as a highly specific, overarching state of being. So the premise is that man is life, but it defines life as a non-material structure possessing spirituality.
Non-material.
Right. The absolute core component of this life is consciousness. So you are not primarily a physical body moving through a physical world. You are, at your essence, pure consciousness.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we are pure consciousness, what does that actually mean for our relationship with the physical world? Because, the world feels pretty darn solid when I, stub my toe on the coffee table.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the author makes a truly radical claim. He states that for consciousness, time, space, the past, and the future simply do not exist.
They don't exist at all.
Nope, they are illusions. Reality, illusion, time, and space are described as these problems that stubbornly exist in human perception. But for life itself, for your pure, unfiltered consciousness, these concepts hold absolutely no weight.
So I was really trying to wrap my head around this, and the best analogy I could come up with is like a flawless virtual reality headset.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Imagine putting on a VR headset that is so incredibly advanced, it perfectly feeds your brain all the sensory input of a specific world. Like if you look over a virtual cliff in this game, your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat.
Your stomach drops.
Exactly. Your nervous system is genuinely reacting. Your consciousness does not care that the cliff is just made of code and pixels. It experiences the fear and the adrenaline as entirely real.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. And the text makes this incredibly explicit, actually. It argues that there is literally zero difference between dreams and reality, or between playing online games and directly participating in those games.
Which is so crazy to think about.
But from the perspective of pure life, your consciousness processes the data the exact same way.
Okay, but wait, I have to push back a little here.
Sure.
If I take off the VR headset, I'm just sitting in my living room, the physical world is still the baseline reality, isn't it? Like, even if the brain is tricked, one state is objectively real and the other is just a simulation.
From a purely physical standpoint, sure, yeah. But the author's philosophical argument is that because the essence of life is purely perception, the actual experience of the simulation carries the exact same existential weight as the physical reality.
Huh.
It goes even further to state there's no difference between a face-to-face chat and a chat you have in a dream, or between concrete physical practice and purely imaginative practice. As long as you perceive it, it is a completely valid reality for your consciousness.
So, like, if you wake up from an intense nightmare where you were being chased, the fear, the exhaustion, the panic, that was all a genuine experience for your life, even though your physical body was just lying completely still in bed?
Precisely. The text emphasizes that in the illusory scene of a dream, what we perceive is identical to what we perceive in reality. Therefore, for life itself, the essential attribute is just the experience.
It just doesn't discriminate.
Exactly. It doesn't discriminate between a physical stimulus and an imagined one.
All right, but this brings up a massive contradiction for me. If our consciousness genuinely does not care where the data comes from, if a beautiful daydream is just as valid an experience as a beautiful physical day out at the park, why are we so incredibly obsessed with the physical now? Like, why is mindfulness, this multi-billion-dollar industry, telling us to hyper-focus on the physical sensations of the present?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, according to this text, we are suffering from a severe limitation of human cognition. The author views the living in the present mindset as the ultimate trap.
The ultimate trap.
Yes. When we insist on living only in the now, we are voluntarily chaining our minds to a four-dimensional space and time. We're essentially locking ourselves into the physical reality of the moment and shutting the door on the infinite possibilities of our consciousness.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, by telling someone to be present when they are super stressed out, we aren't actually helping them. We're basically demanding that they stare at the walls of their prison cell and totally ignore the fact that the door is wide open.
That is exactly the framework. The text argues that living in the present is purely human thinking. It is not the cognition of lives higher than human beings.
Okay, so higher lives operate differently.
Right. Higher lives do not restrict their consciousness to a single point in four-dimensional time. They allow their consciousness to roam free because they understand that perception is literally the only thing that actually matters.
And let's be honest, the author makes a highly compelling, if somewhat bleak argument for why staring at the now is a terrible idea. He gets so detailed about the misery of the present moment. He points out that for most people, the present is genuinely the most troublesome and painful experience.
Yeah, the text lists out the specific burdens of the present, and it really covers the entire spectrum of human suffering, from the profound to the incredibly mundane.
I was reading this list of anxieties he lays out, and it's almost funny how relatable it is.
Oh, it really is.
First, you have the big existential dreads, right? The text says we have to worry about birth, aging, sickness, death, natural disasters, and personal safety. And he also mentions causal disasters.
Which is an interesting term in this context. It essentially refers to the consequences of past actions catching up to you, like the unavoidable ripple effects of human friction.
Right, like legal troubles, interpersonal fallout, the karma of daily life, basically.
Exactly, all of that stuff.
And those are heavy. But then he immediately zooms in on the mundane daily grind. He points out we are weighed down by the sheer effort required for food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. And he literally lists out the financial burdens.
Yes, the bills.
The bills, electricity bills, water fees, internet fees, gas fees, fuel fees, transportation fees, house rent, land tax, and the repair costs for your vehicle. It is exhausting just reading it.
It really is.
And then this is the part that got me. Right next to sickness and death, he complains about the giving of presents between people, calling it annoying enough.
It's a humorous inclusion, for sure, but it highlights a very sharp philosophical point. The author is demonstrating that the physical present is just a relentless onslaught of demands. From the macro-level fear of natural disaster to the micro-level social friction of having to buy an obligatory birthday gift.
Which is always stressful.
It is.
Yeah.
The physical world is just engineered to cause anxiety.
But hold on, I'm struggling with the practicality of this a bit. If I just ignore my internet bill because it's causing me anxiety, my internet gets shut off. That creates more friction. The Stoics would say you find peace by accepting the reality of the bill and dealing with it rationally. How does the author reconcile that?
Well, the author isn't suggesting you don't physically pay the bill.
Oh, okay.
The distinction here is where your consciousness resides while you do it. The Stoic says, accept the present reality of the bill. This text says, why accept a prison? It argues that it's actually an act of deep wisdom to consciously avoid and escape the current situation of confusion and sorrow mentally.
Mentally, so you still do the physical action.
Right. You can physically hand over the money for the water bill while your consciousness is entirely relocated to a better imagined reality. Retreating from the present isn't a weakness here, it's a cognitive shield.
Okay, that makes so much more sense. You're using your mind to insulate yourself from the physical reality. And, the text takes a much darker turn to show exactly why that insulation is necessary. It moves from annoying taxes to the lethal consequences of being trapped in the present.
Yes, the author brings up a very sad, stark reality. Globally, nearly 1 million people commit suicide every year, millions more attempt it, and hundreds of millions have thoughts of ending their own lives.
It is a devastating statistic, and he asks a very direct question. Why do they do it? And his answer is that the present is simply too bitter, and there is no hope, no turning point, and no bright future in sight. It is the ultimate tragedy of those who are forced to live in the moment.
Yeah.
When the moment is unbearable and you believe the moment is all there is, the logic of despair completely takes over.
And this raises an important question about the severe danger of the mindfulness trap. If your present reality is genuinely abusive, impoverished, or physically painful, forcing your consciousness to hyperfixate on that pain without an escape route is deeply destructive.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. To prove how powerfully our perception dictates our reality, the author introduces this brilliant thought experiment. He asks you to imagine a person in deep current distress. They are at absolute rock bottom.
Right.
Now imagine that this specific person suddenly knows, with absolute undeniable certainty, that tomorrow they will receive 1 million yuan. Or they know they will encounter a noble person tomorrow who will rescue them. Or, on a spiritual level, they know they are absolutely destined to enjoy a wonderful life in heaven. The text asks, will that person commit suicide today?
And the answer is, of course not. The text points out that not only will they not end their lives, but they will actually live happily today. They will endure the empty bank account or the immediate physical suffering with a smile.
This is the psychological revelation that completely shifts everything. Think about the mechanics of this. Physically, practically, nothing about the person's present moment has actually changed.
Nothing at all.
Today, they're still broke. The 1 million yuan doesn't arrive until tomorrow. The physical now is identical to the now that was causing them to consider ending their life just moments before.
But their perception has changed entirely. Because their consciousness has anchored itself to a hopeful future, that future has reached back through time and literally altered their present emotional reality. Anticipation ceases to be just a fleeting feeling. It becomes a cognitive painkiller.
That is exactly it. It's weaponized hope. It reminds me a bit of Viktor Frankl's observations in Man's Search for Meaning. He noted that prisoners in the most horrific conditions imaginable could survive if they had a future goal to focus on, like a manuscript to finish or a child to reunite with.
Yes, a very strong parallel.
If they lost that vision of the future, they succumb to the present. The brain literally releases dopamine in anticipation of a reward, which changes the neurochemical state of your body right now.
Exactly. And let's address the skepticism here, because people might ask, is this just psychological dissociation? Is it just escapism? Some might argue that retreating into a fantasy is an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Sure, that's the standard psychological view.
Right. But the text frames it entirely differently. It frames this escapism as a highly evolved survival tool. If your environment is fundamentally hostile, mental escapism isn't a disorder. It is a vital adaptation. Letting your consciousness live in the future makes life significantly better than living in the present.
It basically overwrites the misery. If your mind is living in a glorious tomorrow, it simply doesn't care about the cold reality of today. So, having established that the future is a far superior place for our consciousness to reside, the text finally reveals the mechanism. Like, how do we actually execute this? How do we transcend time and space practically?
Well, the author introduces a method called visualized thinking. Remember the foundational rule. Consciousness does not care if an experience is physical or imagined. It processes both as real data.
The VR headset again?
Exactly, the VR headset. Therefore, you have to actively, purposefully feed your consciousness a better reality through rigorous, vivid imagination. You don't just idly daydream about the future. You construct it through visualized thinking.
And the text offers a very specific roadmap for this. Now, as guides on this deep dive, it's worth noting we are just impartially reporting the source material here. The author uses highly specific conceptual utopias for his readers to imagine. He references his own philosophical framework in instructing the reader to imagine living in the new oasis for life created by Life Chanyuan.
Yes, and Life Chanyuan in this context represents a specific spiritual and philosophical community envisioned by the author, a sort of ideal society free from the friction of modern life.
Okay.
He also encourages the reader to imagine living in the 10,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, or the Elysium Islands continent.
You know, when I first read those names, they sounded like locations in a fantasy novel. But looking deeper at what he's trying to achieve, these aren't just random places, are they? The thousand-year world represents a vision of long-term, unshakable stability, which is the exact opposite of the chaotic, unpredictable present we usually live in.
Exactly. The idea is to build these utopian structures in your mind so thoroughly and with such detail that they become a cognitive flywheel. Once you get the visualization spinning fast enough, your consciousness practically relocates there.
It requires deep mental architecture.
It does. You are supposed to vividly imagine yourself inhabiting these spaces, experiencing the perfection of the Elysium Islands instead of the frustration of your current commute or, your unpaid bills.
And the text claims a very specific result from this practice. It states that by doing this, your current misery is actively alleviated. Like no matter how difficult your physical present is, you will survive it because your mind simply isn't trapped in it anymore.
The imagery he uses is quite poetic, actually. He says that your current troubles and pains will disappear into smoke and clouds, and all your worries and fears will be revealed as just illusions.
Because again, if your physical reality is just one type of perception, and you choose to focus your processing power entirely on a better visualized perception, the physical problems literally lose their power over your nervous system.
Right. It fundamentally changes the texture of daily living. The text claims that once you master this, once your consciousness is fully living in these beautiful visualized futures, you will feel that every day is interesting to live. It states that it makes living feel just like playing games.
Which connects perfectly back to the beginning of the essay where he said there is no difference between playing online games and directly participating in them.
Yes, the loop closes perfectly there.
If you view your physical reality as just a temporary low-stakes game your physical body is playing while your actual life, your consciousness, resides in the 10,000-year world, the pressure of the physical world drops to zero.
And this culminates in the most striking claim in the entire essay. The text states that if you live in the future through visualized thinking, even if death comes, you will be fearless. You will accept it with joy.
Wow. Accept death with joy.
Because your consciousness is already living in an eternal, beautiful state. Death is just the end of the physical illusion. It is not the end of your life's perception.
So what does this all mean? Bringing this all together, we are looking at a philosophy that completely redefines the mechanics of human resilience. The takeaway here isn't necessarily that you must subscribe to a specific utopian visualization group, right? The real insight is recognizing that anticipation is a incredibly powerful cognitive tool.
Exactly. Your consciousness is an incredible, almost omnipotent engine that genuinely does not distinguish between a miserable physical present and a deeply imagined future. The conventional wisdom that demands you be present is essentially asking you to chain this powerful engine to a rock.
If you can weaponize hope, you can neutralize the friction of the present. Why force yourself to suffer through the friction of land taxes, daily anxieties, and causal disasters when you have the innate power to unmoor your mind entirely?
The author asks exactly that. He says, why bother letting the consciousness experience a miserable moment? Why not let the consciousness experience a bright future? It really suggests that our capacity to imagine isn't just for idle daydreaming. It is a vital survival mechanism for transcending the limitations of four-dimensional space and time.
It really makes you reconsider that one-size-fits-all pill of mindfulness. If the present moment is a nightmare, forcing yourself to stay awake inside it is an enlightenment. It's just torture. This text offers a permission slip to check out of a hostile physical reality and build a better one in your mind.
Which leaves us with a final, rather profound mental model for you to consider.
Ooh, let's hear it.
If the absolute essence of your life is truly just perception and experience, and your nervous system cannot actually distinguish between what is physically happening around you and what you deeply, vividly anticipate, what kind of world are you actively choosing to build in your mind right this very second? Are you continuously constructing a prison of present anxieties, or are you architecting an escape route into a better future?
Man, that is something to seriously ponder the next time you find yourself stressed out over an internet bill or some awkward social obligation. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has given you a completely new perspective on time, space, and the incredible reality-altering power of your own consciousness. Until next time, keep questioning the conventional wisdom.